Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Church of St. Gregory the Great. And a special thank you for any of you who are from a different parish or perhaps a different church, different town. We're happy to have you here with us tonight. As we do always when we gather this way, we will begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Most Holy Mother of God, be with us tonight. Fill our hearts and minds with the will of your Son. Help us to pray for the salvation of our world through the intercession of your Immaculate Heart. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Our program tonight will consist of a 50-minute video entitled Fatima, A Message of Hope. The video will be followed by a very informative presentation by Barb Ernster. Barb is the communications manager and editor of Soul magazine for the World Apostolate of Fatima. And Barb has traveled all the way from Minnesota to be here with us tonight. Following the presentation, Barb will take questions from the audience. We have a microphone set up right behind the camera here. So afterwards, you can step right up and ask your questions to Barb. And after that, we ask you to join us in the gathering space. Barb will stick around to answer any of your questions. And you can also peruse some of the items that she brought with her from the gift shop of the World Apostolate of Fatima. So with that, we will begin our presentation with the movie, Fatima, A Message of Hope.
Are bringing the grace to them.
I think there are certain people in life who are chosen by God or by our God or by Our Lady. And it's always been my belief that John was chosen.
Fatima is a place which gives people peace. Even people who do not believe in Fatima and in the parishes, when they come to Fatima and when they are at the shrine, they start to believe.
We always have in our hands the chance to change, and Fatima is a reminder, is an appeal to do that.
In the spring of 1916, much of Western Europe is caught in the throes of World War I. Newly developed weapons such as tanks and machine guns cause unprecedented carnage. The battlefield becomes a picture of hell on earth.
It was a time of upheaval for the European theater.
Like many nations, Portugal sends its young men off to join the war effort. They leave behind families and loved ones in small towns like Fatima, Portugal.
Most of the people were farmers at the time. They were more or less removed from the world. They had their cows, their chickens. They were self-sufficient.
Among the villagers lived 3 young children, Lucia dos Santos and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto.
Lucia was the oldest of the 3 children. She was around 10 years old. Then came Francisco, after that Jacinta. Jacinta was the youngest.
They were kids from a very normal family. Their parents used to work, they were hard workers. They live in that little hamlet, Aljustrel. They used to cultivate the fields in the area. And they used to come here very often with their sheep. They were poor people, humble people, simple people.
They didn't understand too much in the way of the world or had too much education.
But they were spiritual. They were holy. They came from families that had the faith.
In the spring of 1916, these 3 shepherd children would discover they were to play a part in one of the most miraculous events of the 20th century.
So in 1916, the 3 children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, were out tending their sheep. And one day, they saw this young man standing there. It was an angel.
And the angel appeared and told them, "I am the angel of peace. Do not be afraid."
O anjo já lhes disse: Deus tem grandes planos de misericórdia com eles. E está Deus atento às suas orações e aos seus sacrifícios.
And he taught them a prayer, which they call the pardon prayer. My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. And I beg pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, do not love you.
Throughout 1916, the angel appears to the children on 2 more occasions. The second time, he tells them to continue to pray. The third time, he appears with the Blessed Sacrament.
He had the host in his hands, and then Below that, he held the chalice, and the host was dripping the precious blood of Jesus into that chalice. And all of a sudden, the host and chalice remained suspended in the air, and the angel came around, and he knelt down with the children. They bowed their heads to the ground, and he said, "Receive the body and blood of Christ, so outraged by the sins of men, but you make reparation for these sins and please your God." What the angel was really preparing them for was a mission of intercession that Our Lady would bring them the next year.
On May 13th of 1917, the children were playing once again, playing and working, tending their sheep, and they saw this bright flash of light.
And in that light was a beautiful woman.
And I love the description that Lucia later gave. She was all light. What color was her robe? White, but of light. What color was her face, her hands, her feet? Flesh color, but of light.
And Our Lady told them not to be afraid, said I'm from heaven, and that she wanted them to come at that place every month on the 13th.
And she says, are you willing to offer up to God all the sacrifices, all the sufferings that He may send you as an act of reparation for the conversion of sinners?
And they said, yes, we are. With a child's simplicity, these formed souls right away said yes, without hesitation. And Our Lady said, then you will have much to suffer, but I will be there with you.
And after that, Our Lady said, pray the rosary every day in order to obtain peace for the world and that the war may end. And then she began to ascend serenely to the east and disappeared in the infinity of space.
The children initially did not want to tell anybody about this apparition of Our Lady, just as they had not said anything about the apparition of the angel before that. Perhaps maybe because they figured some people would be questioning all about it, doubting it, thinking they made up the whole story.
Lucia, being the eldest, she said, well, we must not tell anybody about this. But of course, Jacinta, being the youngest, could not keep quiet. And when she went home, she told her mother about what she had seen.
Tudo dizia que era mentira. Eu lembro-me de ouvir dizer ao pai da Jacinta e do Francisco, para ela dizerem que era mentira. Diziam que podia ser o demónio a tentá-las.
Lucia's mother, she didn't believe. She thought they were making up the whole story. She said, this is going to bring disgrace on us. People are going to be making fun of us and questioning the whole thing.
Lucia's family were a very good family. They were very well known. They had a good reputation. And one thing that the mother of Lucia would not admit was that any of her sons or daughters would tell a lie. And so, when this started, they said, you are lying. You must tell people that this is not happening, this is not true.
One of the most important things about a genuine apparition is that it is an intersection of God, the infinite, absolute, all-powerful, all-knowing God, and a humble little human soul. People who have a genuine encounter with God must strain
First of all, to comprehend it, to understand it to some degree, and to express it to other people. Because it's not like an encounter with another human being. We have no adequate understanding of what that is like.
Despite the parents' skepticism, word of what has taken place in the Cova da Ira quickly begins to spread throughout Fatima.
The word of mouth would be like a domino effect. One person would tell another, and another family would get a word of it, and then eventually the people were coming to the apparition site.
On June 13th, as instructed, the children returned to the Cova da Ira. They were accompanied by approximately 50 people. They were coming to understand that this was bigger than them.
Kneeling in front of the holm oak tree where they had first seen her, the children wait for Our Lady. In a flash of light, she appears again, as promised.
In the June apparition, the children asked her, the people want to know who you are, and secondly, they want a sign that you really are coming here. She said, in October, I will tell you who I am, and I will give you a sign that the people will not be able to doubt that I am coming here.
Lucia then asks Our Lady if she and her cousins will go to heaven.
And she said to them, you will. Jacinta and Francisco will come soon, but you, Lucia, will have to stay to make me known and loved. And then Our Lady said, pray, continue to pray, particularly the Rosary.
The Rosary is a rose garden, a rose place. It's supposed to be a bit penitential as an act of devotion. And to this very day, it provides people, simple and complicated people, with an opportunity to step back from the noise and din of life and to place themselves in a rose garden of prayer.
By the time July 13th came around, the third apparition, the numbers of people showing up at the Cova hoping to see something had increased dramatically.
When Mary came in July, it was very different. This was the longest of the apparitions, and as I always say, most important as far as the message.
In the third apparition, Our Lady revealed the core of the message in a secret with 3 parts. In the first part of the secret, she showed a vision of hell.
Em primeiro lugar, depois de olhar para as crianças, de repente os pequenos viram no fundo da terra. Era buraco muito profundo, mar de fogo.
And in that vision, they saw animal-like figures and human figures rising and falling out of the flames, and the look of despair upon their faces as they realized that they were separated from God for all eternity.
What they saw was the internal desperation of the people there and the finality of their loss. They saw permanent separation from God. And Our Lady said to them, you have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. Are you willing to offer your life in prayer and reparation so people will avoid this fate? This truly was the definition of why they were being given these manifestations and why these had to be brought to the world.
So that was the first part of the secret. The second part, Mary brought up the question of the war. World War I was raging at the time, And Blessed Mother said the war will end soon. It ended the next year, 1918. And Mary said, peace will come if people do what I say. If not, she said, a more terrible war would come.
And then she said something very interesting. When you see a night lit up by an unknown light, know that it is a sign that God is about to punish the world for its sins.
Then Our Lady said that Russia would spread her errors. She was talking about the rise of communism, of atheistic communism, and what that would bring to the church and to the world.
And she said, to prevent this, I will come back and I will ask for two things. I will ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart. And I will ask, secondly, for what she called the communion of reparation. We call it the First Saturday devotion.
Ainda houve uma outra visão chamada terceira parte do segredo.
The third part of the secret began with an angel and a sword pointing down to the earth and what looked like lightning coming down toward the earth.
He's ready to touch the earth. And the Blessed Mother put her hand out, and the breezes from her hand prevented the fire of the sword from touching the earth.
That symbolizes Mary holding back the arm of God's justice, holding back the arm of her Son to give us a bit more time. And then they see a man in white, which they presumed was the Holy Father. And he was walking through a city half in ruins with the dead bodies of priests, bishops, religious, people from all walks of life strewn all about, and a small remnant was following him.
And the Pope goes up the mountain and he falls in prayer before the crucifix, and all of a sudden these evil men with bows and arrows kill him.
At the end of the apparition, Our Lady told the children not to reveal what she had shown them to anyone. So these three things that Our Lady showed to the children became what is known today as the secret of Fatima.
By August, the effects of the apparitions and the attention that now had come to the small community were bearing down strongly on the children and on their families. And the government of Portugal at that time was very anti-clerical.
They were very much against what was taking place, and they didn't like what they called rumors being spread and the people going to Fatima. So when the August apparition came around, they kidnapped the children, took them to prison, and tried to get them to deny that they were seeing Our Lady.
For 2 days, government officials intimidate the children, attempting to force them to reveal the secret and denounce the apparitions. Separating them from one another, they threaten to boil the children in oil if they do not admit that what they said was a lie.
Medo, mostravam taxa de azeite e punham-nos à parte e diziam, olha, a Jacinta já foi frita e tu vais ser frita aqui, senão não disseres ao contrário. Não, mas nós vimos Nossa Senhora. Tentaram sempre que viam Nossa Senhora.
They were threatened with death if they didn't give in, and they didn't. The administrators, the government, they were forced to allow them to come back into the community. That is probably the biggest thing that convinced so many of the secular people and the skeptics that this is something very real.
By October, word of the apparitions and of Our Lady's promise to provide a sign for all to witness had spread throughout Portugal. On the 13th of the month, a approximately 70,000 people gather in the muddy, rain-soaked Covodaria.
My grandfather told me that on that day, October 13th, he left home with a friend and walked to where now the shrine is. And when they arrived there, there was already a big crowd. There were 70,000 people on that day.
Thousands of people were there, including many unbelievers who were also reporters from the secular newspapers in Lisbon, Portugal.
At noon, as promised, Our Lady once again appears to the children. This time, she appears alongside Saint Joseph and the child Jesus. She then shows herself as Our Lady of Sorrows, and finally as Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
And she told the children, I am the Lady of the Rosary.
As the children watch in rapture, Lucia suddenly cries out to the people, telling them to look at the sun. The promised miracle is about to begin.
Now the sun was hidden behind all these clouds. The clouds started to separate. You could see the sun. Then the sun began to pulsate like a heart beating, giving off these various colors of light. Green, orange, yellow. And the people saw themselves as green, orange, yellow in the light of the sun.
And the sun began to rotate. In zigzag fortune, it appeared to leave its orbit. They thought it was going to crash into them.
People felt like it was the end of the world, and they began to confess themselves. They began to feel that this was it.
As pessoas todas gritaram, todas joelharam, todas pediram perdão a Nossa Senhora, para que Nossa Senhora trouxe aqui a gente, para morrermos todos.
And all of a sudden, as the sun was hurling down toward the earth, it stopped. The sky cleared, and everybody was dry. Their clothes were dry, the earth was dry.
There was no mud, there was no rain, there was nothing anymore.
This is what is called a theophany, meaning a showing of God. And this is the most remarkable theophany in modern times, because it was seen by tens of thousands of people. It constitutes a rather remarkable demonstration of the existence and providence of God.
Many of the government officials that came to disprove this. They wanted to show that nothing was going to happen, but they began to believe. The newspapers even wrote and said, this miracle happened.
The anti-religious newspapers in Lisbon carried the story with a direct recitation, no comment. The report is saying this is what happened.
The miracle of the sun proved to the world that the apparitions of Fatima were real. The believers and the skeptics now at least understood that this was something couldn't be denied. This is why this manifestation was made.
But while the miracle of the sun showed the world the truth of the apparitions, young Francisco and young Jacinto would not live long enough to see this acceptance.
Little Jacinta got the Spanish flu, which took about 20 million lives right after World War I had ended. Her brother Francisco also had it.
Remember, Our Lady said that she would take them to heaven soon. Francisco died April 4th, 1919. Jacinta died February 20th, 1920.
With Jacinta and Francisco gone, Lucia becomes the sole surviving visionary of Fatima.
God bless her, Lucia of Fatima, to live all of her life as the witness of Fatima. Pushed and pulled and questioned over and over again.
She tried to stay there in Fatima, but so many people were coming to her, they were bothering her constantly, that the bishop told her, you should go to northern Portugal where you are not known. So she did. She went up to the area around Porto. She was studying with the Sisters of St. Dorothy.
During this time, Sister Lucia didn't even go by her true name. The bishop wanted her protected. He did not want people to know that this was the surviving seer of Fatima. Only her superiors in the convent knew who she was.
After joining the Dorothean community, Lucia eventually travels to Pontevedra, Spain, to complete her postulancy.
During the July apparition, Our Lady had told the children she would come back to ask for the consecration of Russia and the practice of the first Saturday devotion. She came in 1925, appearing to Sister Lucia in Pontevedra, the Dorothean convent.
In her little room, one day, all of a sudden, she had a vision. The Blessed Mother appeared. But her heart was surrounded by a crown of thorns. And Jesus spoke to Lucia. He said, you see the heart of your mother, surrounded by a crown of thorns, put there by evil men. Who will take those thorns out of the heart of your mother? Then Our Lady spoke, and she said, Lucia, at least you do this for me, and tell anyone who on 5 consecutive first Saturdays will go to confession, receive Holy Communion, pray 1 rosary 5 decades, and then spend 15 minutes meditating about the other decades of the rosary, all to make reparation to my Immaculate Heart for the offenses against my heart. Then my triumph will come. And so that became the first Saturday devotion.
In 1936, Sister Lucia writes the first of what would become 4 memoirs about her experiences at Fatima. Only in 1944, at the request of the Bishop of Loria, does she finally describe the 3rd part of the July vision, in which the children saw the Pope struck down and killed. This revelation is immediately taken to the Vatican, where it would be held in secret for many decades.
O próprio bispo, o sucessor do primeiro bispo, levou esta carta para a Santa Sé por João 23, leu a carta dizendo, se ele publicar esta carta, ninguém vai perceber. E assim ficou esta 3ª parte, no entanto, de que quero já falar.
By the late 1930s, the dire predictions made by Our Lady begin to come true with shocking accuracy. In 1938, the aurora borealis lights up the night sky as never before.
And that night happened on January 25th, 26th, 1938, just shortly before Hitler moved his troops into Poland with the beginning of World War II in Europe.
The outbreak of World War II devastates the globe, creating pain and suffering on a scale never before imagined.
One of the revelations of Fatima, one of the statements of Our Lady was, nations could be annihilated. Now comes 1945. The atomic bomb. It seemed very real.
In the post-war years, the rise of communism in Russia leads to the establishment of the USSR. and the spread of atheism throughout much of Eastern Europe.
The Bolsheviks moved quickly against the churches of Russia, for religion has no place in the new communist creed. Religion, says communism, is the opiate of the people.
She said, this evil will persecute the church. It will provoke wars. We had Korea. We had Vietnam.
She saw this coming. She saw this happening. All this was predicted at Fatima. "30 years after the apparition, Sister Lucia was very dismayed that the Fatima message had not truly been embraced. World War II had happened. Russia had spread her errors. The Cold War had begun. The world was a mess.
And she was really contemplating leaving her order to go out and spread the message of Fatima. And then she met John Hafford, our founder.
John Hafford had a meeting with Sister Lucia, who was now a Carmelite sister. And he explained to her his idea for an apostolate based on a pledge. The pledge to say the rosary, to offer up all of our sacrifices in our lives, in our daily duty for the conversion of sinners. And she loved this pledge. He said, this is what is needed.
And he promised her that he would help spread this message. And she was so convinced that John could do this and that he was a gift from Our Lady that she stayed in her order.
After returning from his meeting with Sister Lucia, John Hafford meets with a priest named Monsignor Harold Colgan.
Harold Colgan, who was a priest in New Jersey, who had suffered a very severe heart attack.
And the doctors told him he had maybe 4 or 5 days to live. So he prayed to the Blessed Mother and said if his life was spared, he would promote devotion to her. And so on that Friday, he walked out of the hospital, he was totally cured.
So Monsignor Colgan and John Hafford came together, and they formed the Blue Army of Our Lady of Fatima in 1947.
At Monsignor Colgan's direction, members of the Blue Army wear the color blue and act as a blue army of prayer to fight the Red Army of atheistic communism.
So what they did was spread these requests of Our Lady of Fatima in order to prevent the spread of communism.
After the founding of the organization in 1947, things began to move rapidly. In 1947, the International Pilgrim Virgin statue was brought to the United States by Mr. Hafford, by the Blue Army, to begin traveling around the United States, bringing the Fatima message. In 1950, we began Soul magazine, which has now been published continuously since that time. In 1954, we purchased the property across the street from the shrine in Fatima to build Domus Pacis, our retreat center. In the 80s, we purchased our own jet, a 707, the Queen of the World, which brought people to Fatima and to the other shrines of the world. This was how the Fatima message was promoted. The Fatima message is the Gospels. Our Lady asked us to return to living in accord with the Gospels, and our mission was to help people by bringing them to the holy places of the world or bringing the grace to them.
I think there are certain people in life who are chosen by God or by Our Lady, and it's always been my belief that John was chosen to do this work. Wherever he was, whatever he was doing, that was foremost in his life, making known the messages of Our Lady of Fatima in the world.
In the spring of 1981, the message and story of Fatima once again becomes news around the world.
On May 13th of 1981, the anniversary of Our Lady's first apparition, the Pope is being driven around in the Pope-mobile in St. Peter's Square. And all of a sudden, shots ring out. there's an attempt to kill the Pope.
When John Paul II had been shot and was rushed to Gemelli Hospital, as soon as he was able, he asked for the secret of Fatima to be brought to him.
He said, "Bring me the third secret," which was where the children had seen in that July apparition, the third part. They saw the Pope get shot on the hill, and he reads it, and he realized, that's me. This is about me. I should have died, he said.
The hand of Our Lady of Fatima intervened. You see, the bullet was aimed right towards his heart without hitting any solid object. It misdirected, it was redirected and came out in the Pope-mobile.
The doctors who tend to him attest that the saving of his life had to be nothing short of miraculous.
And as it was said later, one hand guided the gun, another hand guided the bullet.
Exactly 1 year later, on May 13th, 1982, Pope John Paul II travels to Fatima to thank Our Lady for saving his life. The bullet that had nearly killed him is placed in the crown that sits atop the miraculous statue.
I was there that year when the Pope was there, and they estimated 1 million people. It spilled right out beyond the cova. And he knelt before the spot where Our Lady appeared, just absorbed in prayer, like he was oblivious to these hundreds of thousands of people. And the thing that struck me, it was a beautiful evening at 9:30, with hundreds of thousands of people there. When he knelt before that spot where the Mother God appeared, I could not hear a sound. It was quite an experience.
From then on, Fatima became one of the most important things for Pope John Paul.
Filled with a new devotion to Our Lady of Fatima, John Paul II becomes determined to fulfill her request by consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. On March 25th, 1984, this consecration is finally performed.
John Paul II asked for the Bishop of Fatima to bring the miraculous statue of Fatima, the one that sits on the very spot where Our Lady appeared, to bring that to Rome. And in the presence of that statue, the image of Our Lady of Fatima, he leads the consecration, and bishops throughout the world join him in their own diocese.
Depois desta consagração, fui ter com a irmã Lucia e perguntei-lhe, finalmente este Papa agora conseguiu fazer a consagração como Nossa Senhora pediu? Ela respondeu, sim, esta consagração foi aceita pelo céu. Quando perguntei-lhe, que sinal vamos ter? Só me disse, olhar para o leste, lá vem a resposta.
Not long after that collegial consecration was conducted, things began to change. This was overwhelming for me to turn on the television and see this day after day. And then by December 1st, 1989, Mikhail Gorbachev, president of Russia, actually goes to see the Pope at the Vatican. Imagine that, from the atheistic country that had as its goal to spread atheistic communism over the whole globe and conquer the whole world. He goes to see the Pope. And by December 25th, 1991, the red flag was lowered over the Kremlin for the last time.
You cannot look at the events in Eastern Europe without realizing that something special happened. No one ever thought that the end of the Cold War would come in a whimper.
In 1992, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a chance to bring Our Lady finally to enter Russia, headed by John Hafford. They descended this peace flight, entering the Red Square of Moscow, possessing Our Lady's image. Such a symbolic picture when we are used to seeing Moscow and Red Square with tanks and nuclear weapons. And now the Blue Army coming in, processing with the image of Our Lady and crowning her as Queen of the World in front of Lenin's tomb.
Today, the Blue Army has evolved into the World Apostolate of Fatima.
The World Apostolate of Fatima is a pontifical association of the faithful established by Pope John Paul II. And this pontifical association of the faithful is an organization where lay people come together to spread the message of Fatima.
In the United States, there are more than 70 divisions in 36 states, plus the District of Columbia. Worldwide, the organization also has a presence in every continent on the globe.
The World Apostolate of Fatima, I believe, are the principal bearers of the message of Fatima. They are the principal evangelizers, like the further 72 that the Lord Jesus sent out to announce his soon arrival. That's how I see the World Apostolate.
Unlike some other organizations that are similar in nature, the World Apostolate of Fatima is the only Fatima apostolate that has the approval of the Church. There's great truth to what's being spoken by the World Apostolate of Fatima.
Located in Washington, New Jersey, the World Apostolate of Fatima's headquarters was built on land donated by John Hafford. Today, it is known as the National Blue Army Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima.
John's idea, I suppose, in building it was to identify the Blue Army and whether people should come here. The shrine went up in 1978, and the roof is supposed to represent Our Lady's mantle over everybody. And then the statue at the top, at one time, was the largest bronze statue in the United States.
Each year, on the 13th of the month from May through October, tens of thousands of people gather here to honor the Blessed Mother.
Every 13th, there's such an outpouring of love. It's a joyous occasion. I met so many people that come here that they always walked away with a blessing and a grace.
Mainly, it's a day of pilgrimage. So people are coming on pilgrimage to the shrine in order to give honor to Our Lady.
I call this the Virtual United Nations because we have people from every country in the world that comes here.
In addition to spreading Our Lady's message through events at the shrine, the World Apostolate of Fatima also continues to take her message out to the world through programs such as the 2016 to 2017 Fatima Centennial U.S. Tour for Peace with the world-famous International Pilgrim Virgin Statue.
Pilgrim Virgin Statue program, which keeps moving now throughout the United States, is us bringing Fatima to the people. This statue has been traveling now from 1947 to this day, all around the world, bringing the Fatima message.
The point of the statue tour is to continue the work that started all the way back in 1947. That same statue is traveling now to 100 different dioceses, spreading the message of Fatima by making a tour all around the world.
It's an opportunity for people to come in, to say the rosary, to participate in Mass, to go to confession. In some cases, learn the rosary and to learn the message of Fatima. What does it mean? What does it mean to me today? And how can I live better knowing what our Mother has asked us to do?
But we need to go back to Mary and go back to Jesus, and when we fall short, we need to go to the sacrament.
My hope comes from her love for us as a mother and, from Jesus Christ sacrificing himself for me.
It is the life and the journey of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's why it is so powerful, and I am full of hope.
We're all God's family, and we need to spread that out to the world.
To me, it's amazing how Our Lady still works in the hearts of men. People keep on asking me, what kind of miracles have you seen so far? I tell them so many times, it's the heretics' change of heart. It's the sinner's conversion by means of Our Lady's intercession and prayer. I think, to me, that's the most important miracle, that Our Lady is doing her job in leading us to Jesus.
Whenever we bring Our Lady's statue from diocese to diocese, the one thing that I've always noticed is that people from all ethnic backgrounds come, and there's one common thing: Mama Mary. And so Mary brings us closer to Jesus. To know and love Mary is to know Jesus.
Like a great mother, she is always trying to lead her children to the true understanding of peace, wisdom, and love. That's what the Blessed Mother promotes in all of her sayings and all of her messages. She simply wants us to come home.
In the midst of the struggles of life, to feel that somebody who represents God is praying for you. I think that that's a very beautiful thing.
On May 13th, the year 2000, Pope John Paul went back to Fatima and he beatified little Jacinta and little Francisco, which means they are blessed, one step away from being declared saints.
In fulfillment of the mission given to her by Our Lady, Lucia continued to spread devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary until her death at age 97.
In 2005, Sister Lucia passed away. She lived all those years in the convent between the Dorotheans and with the Carmelites. And she remained faithful to the message until her death.
And so she's buried in the big church there on the grounds of Our Lady of Fatima. And she's buried next to her little cousin Jacinta. And on the other side of the church, Francisco is buried. So the three of them are there.
The triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary has not yet occurred. In many respects, the world is even more sinful. And the spirituality for sacrifice, for a life of prayer, worship, adoration, all of this that was called for by Fatima is more relevant than ever.
The message of Fatima is a call to action, to change our own lives and to take that into the world so that changes the world, that changes society. And who can change society? Who are the leaven of society? Who are the salt of the earth and the lights of the world? Ordinary Christians who have heard the urgency of that message from the Mother and are doing it.
The message of Fatima is a message of inclusion. Peace has no religion. Peace is for everybody. And be it a Muslim or a Jew or a Catholic, we must promote it and develop it in our families, within ourselves, in the world. So I think this is a project for humankind who must get on the right track and get closer to God and transform this world into a better world.
Pope John Paul II, St. Pope John Paul II once said, "This is a message more relevant today than it was in 1917. Pope Benedict in 2010 said we would be mistaken to believe that Fatima's prophetic message is complete. And Pope Francis has been a great supporter of Fatima since the day he consecrated his papacy to Our Lady of Fatima. This is for today. It's for the future. You see, Our Lady gave us a prescription for life. And Fatima is a prescription for life.
And so the call is for the young people, because they're the ones who can change our world. They're the ones who, through their prayer, through their love of God, through their devotion to knowing that Mother Mary is their mother, they can help build the world that God promised us. Because God didn't send Our Lady to say that we're doomed, that there's going to be war and destruction, and that souls are going to fall into hell. No, she came to say, yes, these things can happen. But if we pray and we offer up reparation for the sacrifices of our daily lives, there doesn't have to be war. There doesn't have to be famine. And that souls can be saved and go to heaven.
The closer we are to God, there is love and serenity. The farther we get away from God, there is chaos and hatred. This is both on earth and in eternity. This is what Fatima is all about, to bring people to move themselves closer and closer to living in accord with the Gospels and becoming closer and closer to God.
And so the message of Fatima is important today because we're not going to solve our problems with guns, with legislation. It's going to be solved because people are going to turn back to God. Just look around us and see God's calling us.
For more information on how you can help spread the message of Our Lady of Fatima and be part of the World Apostolate of Fatima, visit our website at bluearmy.com.
What a beautiful film. What a beautiful message, especially for today. I think the one young lady towards the end of that film put it so beautifully when she said, we need to return to our Blessed Mother, we need to return to Jesus, we need to return to the sacraments. With that, I'd like to welcome our pastor, Father Mike Hall, who will introduce our guest speaker for this evening.
So this is probably one of those rare cases where audio is better at home than it is in the church, unfortunately. I know we're having a little bit of a struggle with that. For those of you who had a little bit of a trouble with the video audio, remember you can watch it on the live stream recording that has been done when you go home if you'd like to see it again. So it's available again to see. So sorry about that. We're working on it. Tonight we are honored to have with us Barb Ernster from the World Apostolate of Fatima. She's been a Catholic writer for 30 years, a regular contributor to the National Catholic Register, and for more than a decade she has been studying the message of Fatima. She discovered how best to live the message of Fatima when she was asked to edit the English translation of the biography of Sister Lucia. Studying Sister Lucia's life taught her the simplicity and the beauty of living as Our Lady asked. Barb has given talks at conferences around the country. She's been a guest speaker on Relevant Radio and on other radio programs and contributes regularly to the Blue Army podcast. So tonight she's going to share her valuable insight, which will help us to understand the relevance of Fatima in today's troubled times. And so we thank her for coming all the way from Minnesota to be here with us. So, Barb Ernster.
Can you hear me okay? The sound? Yep. Okay. Well, I mean, after the DVD, I don't think I have anything more to say because it just sums it all up. So if you haven't seen the DVD or you don't know a whole lot about Fatima, does this help you understand it? And have you seen the new movie Fatima that was put out? Okay, I just get so disappointed when they can't just use Our Lady's words, because Our Lady's words are so beautiful. And I, like many of you, grew up hearing about Fatima as a little girl, but I didn't pay much attention, There were 3 little shepherd children who saw, a little louder, turn it up, slide it up. How is this? Hold the mic. It doesn't get echoey. Oh my goodness, like. There's got to be how's this? Is this working? Okay, if I hold it, does it get echoey? How's that? Okay. So I have to say, I learned about Fatima as a child, but I set it aside like many people did. And I have to say it was St. Francisco who brought me back in. I just find that the richness and the depth of the Fatima message, it just never ends. I can read the messages of Our Lady over and over and over again, and she only appeared 6 times and didn't say very much, but there's so much spiritual richness to this message that there's a whole, Our Lady came and she revealed a whole spirituality surrounded on the devotion to her Immaculate Heart, and she spent 88 years with Lucia helping her spread it to the world. She carried on a dialogue with Lucia, and when I was asked to edit the biography of Sister Lucia, that's when I started to understand how you live this message through her life. I mean, she got up every day and she gave herself to God. She said, and St. Faustina has said this too, it doesn't matter if you have ecstasies or all these spiritual phenomenon and things that St. Faustina experienced. She said it was her union with God's will that allowed her to accomplish what she did. That's what John Paul II did. It's what Lucia did. Our Lady taught the children a prayer during I think it was the 3rd apparition after they had seen the vision of hell. And she was always calling for conversion and sacrifice. And she said, every time you make a sacrifice, say this, "Oh my Jesus, it is for love of you, for the conversion of sinners, and in reparation for sins committed against the Immaculate Heart." And Lucia said that prayer over and over and over again. And the number one thing she said that we need to do in order to become holy is to, she said the essential message of Fatima was from that very first apparition when Mary came to ask them, "Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear patiently with all the sufferings He brings to you?" And she said that when she said yes, she said, I had no idea what I was saying yes to. They were so enamored with the beauty of the Blessed Mother. They said she was made of light. Sometimes they would blink because, and when they were questioned, they'd say, "Well, why are you blinking your eyes?" And they said, "Because she's so brilliant, she's so dazzling." And so here's Lucia and Francisca and Jacinta ready to do anything this lady asked them to do. And when she said, "Are you willing to offer yourselves and bear all the sufferings?" Well, they didn't have a whole lot of suffering at that time. So Lucia said, "I said yes, but I had no idea what I was saying yes to." And she learned very quickly that it was going to be, suddenly her family was against her. The villagers were mocking her. This revered little girl who everybody liked because she really knew her catechism well was now, mocked and taunted. And it was a terrible suffering for her. And Lucia, throughout her life, had many moments of almost like a dark night of the soul. She experienced one right before the July apparition, where she didn't want to go to the apparition. She thought she was seeing the devil, and she couldn't come out of this darkness. And then all of a sudden, at the very last moment, the light, it lifted and she decided to go. And that's when this very important message was revealed to the children. I'm kind of losing track of, there's so many ways I can take this message. You can go any direction and you just keep going down a rabbit hole. I want to talk to you, though, about two people that were at the Miracle of the Sun. And I love this story because it really illustrates something we can all think about. Today we celebrated at the Shrine in New Jersey. I'd love it if all of you can come up there. It's only an hour and a half from here. I don't know if any of you have ever been there to our 13th of the month events. They're just so beautiful. And so today, of course, is the anniversary of the Miracle of the Sun. And I love the story of Mario and Dominic. They're two people that were at the Miracle. Mario was a 25-year-old engineering student. He was from a wealthy background. He owned a car that was not very common. It was a Peugeot. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I think it was a French car. He, like many of his young friends, did not have any interest in religion. And many of our young people today are very similar to Mario. He was more in tune with getting his degree and moving on with his career and becoming very wealthy. So he was very much in agreement with the anti-religious government that was in place then. But his mother was a very devout Catholic, and as soon as she heard about the May 13th apparition, she insisted that Mario bring her to the Cova every month. And so, because he had a car, that became his guilt trip that he had to get his mother over to Fatima every month. And so on June 13th, the reluctant Mario brought his mother over to the Cova, and they got out of the car, and the children were actually making their way down to the apparition site. And so they asked them if they would meet them afterwards, after the apparition. I guess apparently even back then, the people of wealth get access that other people don't. And so after the apparition, they did go and meet the children in their home. Well, Mario was just completely unimpressed with these little country bumpkins. I mean, he saw them as just completely uneducated. And of course, he's the educated engineer who's driving a car, he's wealthy, and he was just totally appalled that his mother would even believe these three. Well, let me tell you what happened on June 13th to those kids. That was the apparition where Mary told them Jacinta and Francisco would go to heaven soon, but Lucia would have to remain on earth in order to spread this devotion to the Immaculate Heart. And that's when she showed them her heart covered in thorns. Lucia said they understood that it was due to the sins of the world that required reparation. And so that's when Our Lady also raised her hands and radiated the light of God. The children were immersed in that light. They saw themselves in God. Francisco was so taken by this experience that he exclaimed, "We saw ourselves in that great light that is God." What is God? We could never explain it. We could never put it into words. I mean, can you imagine? I know there's a lot of people waiting for this illumination of conscience that's supposed to come, but they saw themselves in God's light. Mary made them blink because she was so dazzling. Well, now they saw this immense light that they were able to look at without hurting their eyes. They actually experienced the presence of God. So because they couldn't put it into words, they decided to remain quiet about it. I mean, if any of you have ever had any kind of an experience of God, you know it's something that's personally for you. You try to share it with your kids. You think, oh, this is going to inspire them. You have no words to explain the experience you just had. So that's how these children were. So this is what Mario faced that day. And you just look at the dichotomy of, they just had this most profound experience, and here's this person who I would consider maybe part of the elite who was not impressed with them. But he continued to bring his mother every month, and in August, when the children had been arrested, they were at the Cova de Ria, and his mother was healed of a brain tumor. Still, Mario shrugged it off. It didn't move him. So you can imagine what his mother was feeling. You'll hear him. All of us who are praying for kids that we want converted, and look at what's going on here between Mario and his mother. And so by October, Mario was again bringing his mother there. And one of the things he was most afraid of is that his friends would find out that he was one of the first ones to go to Fatima. He was afraid that his car was going to show up in one of the newspaper ads or something. And so he sat in his car while his mother and her friends or whoever made their way to the cova. Pretty soon he heard the crowd screaming and yelling. So he got out of the car and he looked up and he saw the sun. He said, I was able to look at it. There was like a silver disc in front of it. And then it started to spin and cast out these colors all over the ground. And then it started to whirl and fall to the earth. And I love this comment from him. He said, I saw that sun as I never saw it again, and then I believed. Now remember, Mary said she would perform a miracle so that all would believe. So here was the unbelieving Mario, and he did believe when he saw the miracle. But what did he do with this gift? After the apparitions were over, he did absolutely nothing with it. He said, when he finally gave his testimony to John Hafford, he said, I never told anybody about it, not even my wife. I wonder what he said to his mother that day. I mean, they just both experienced this amazing miracle, but I wonder if they ever talked about it. He said he kept it to himself. And later in life, when he was much older, he said, now I am old, my parents are gone, my wife is gone, I'm at the end of my career, and I'm very sad. All I have left to hope for is that I can join them. And I just thought, you know, this man never did anything with this most profound miracle. And he hid his face under the bushel basket his entire life. And on the other hand, we had a man named Dominic Reese, who was 17 and went to the cova that day with his parents. He felt from the very beginning that this was a great gift, and he wanted to tell everybody about Fatima. He ended up moving to America soon after the October events, and he never saw his parents again. But he gave his testimony about the miracle on radio and television to newspapers. He was on the TV show with Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He was on the TV show with our founder, John Hafford. And if you go on YouTube today, you can find his testimony. He's still giving his testimony long after his death. So you find, you know, you hear about the people that walked away from Jesus, and you only hear about the testimony of those who believed and continued to spread the gospel. You don't hear about the ones that walked away. They just kind of go into the dustbin of history. And this is kind of what happened with Mario. So I like to point this out. Both Mario and Dominic received the blessing that St. Joseph and the child Jesus imparted to the world in that the vision that only the children saw. They also received the second blessing from Jesus, who appeared next to Mary as a young man. But the moral is we can all be shown great miracles. We can have access to the greatest graces and healings and supernatural phenomenon. But what matters is what we do with it. And so this is what the Fatima message calls us to. Too often we focus on the more dramatic parts of the Fatima message, and I have no problem answering any questions about the third secret or the consecration because we get them all the time. But that will take me down a rabbit hole that we don't want to go down right now. But what happens is we miss the bigger picture, our own response to it. So Mary wants our yes to God, just as she gave her yes to God at the Annunciation. This is a timeless invitation for all generations. And that was the first request she made to the children at Fatima. Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and accept and bear patiently with all the sufferings you encounter in your day, and offer it as a sacrifice for the conversion of sinners? Lucia said, the Fatima apparitions, the Fatima message, and I have to find my notes here. She said, the Fatima message asks us to undertake an apostolate on behalf of our brothers and sisters. It is a continuation of the mission of Christ on earth. We must be co-workers with Christ in his work of redemption, in the salvation of souls. So in 1999, Lucia told our founder, John Hafford, that the thing we need to do in order to see the triumph of the Immaculate Heart is to work on our personal conversion. And that requires that we follow God's commandments. I mean, God's commandments are the way in which we show him that we're in line with his will. And too many people are walking away from them and mocking them. We don't even want to listen to church teaching anymore. But So the first thing we got to do is get right with God again and trust in His commandments. These are not rules, as my children sometimes say. They're ways of living for our own good. The second thing we need is a personal prayer life with Jesus every day. We're not going to have a union with our will with His unless we're praying. So the Fatima message, of course, asks us for the daily rosary. And Our Lady promised peace because of this. She didn't just mean peace in the world or peace in nations. She meant peace in our hearts and in our families. And Lucia herself said, there's no problem whatsoever that cannot be solved by the rosary. Now, I will say that I've been praying the rosary for a long time, and sometimes it does get boring. Sometimes it's very difficult to concentrate, and I think, oh, I can give myself a pass because I've said so many rosaries. And there's other times when I say, well, geez, Lord, how many rosaries do you need before this world is going to turn? That's another frustrating thing we have. But Lucia said we're in the third day of the week of Fatima. We're in the post-consecration era. And she said, I won't live to see the end of the week, but it's going to take a long time for things to unfold to the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And that's when she encouraged people to work on your personal conversion. And the one thing I love about Fatima is it's so tied in with St. Louis de Montfort. How many of you have actually done consecration to Jesus through Mary? Have you figured out how deep that message goes as well? I was speaking with Father Hugh Gillespie, who teaches the consecration. And he gets a little irritated when you just go take a little 33-day booklet off the shelf that came out of Father Michael Gately, and he's understanding the whole depth of the message. And he said very few people actually get to the point where you're, holy slavery. And he said even John Paul II didn't get to the highest levels of this holy slavery. So I don't even want to go there. But Lucia said, and I don't know if I brought my water here. I'm sorry, but I'm getting very dry. Lucia said that the message of Fatima is how you live the devotion to the Immaculate Heart. It's kind of maybe a low-level daily way of doing it. When you get to the St. Louis de Montfort series, it takes you deeper. And I've done the consecration several times, but I can't say that I get up every morning and think, oh, that's right, I'm consecrated to Mary. What am I supposed to do today? But I get up and I say my rosary. I say my morning offering. I make my offering to Jesus every day through the Immaculate Heart of Mary, that everything that's going to happen to me in this day becomes a prayer. And if you pray for the spirit of recollection, throughout the day when some suffering comes your way, like I remember one time my sister came and stayed with me from Germany, and I hope she never sees this talk because she was irritating me. She stayed for about a month. And I just remember offering up the irritation, and within seconds, it was gone when I made the offering and said the prayer, "Oh, my Jesus, it is for love of you, for the conversion of sinners." Thank you. The irritation actually went away. And that can happen with, things we encounter in our workplace. So this is a very simple way to live out your consecration to Mary. She wants us to wear the brown scapular as a sign of our entrustment to her as well. But I want to talk about St. Louis de Montfort, and then I'll get into a little bit about why this is so important today. St. Louis de Montfort, as you know, was writing in the 17th century. Now, he died on April 28, 1716. Exactly 200 years later, in possibly April, in the spring of 1916, that's when the angel started to appear to the children and prepares them for this visit of the Blessed Mother. And she is at this time wanting this devotion to the Immaculate Heart established in the world. I imagine St. Louis de Montfort was jumping for joy in heaven, that what he was writing about, what he was longing for, was starting to unfold at Fatima. Now, he wrote that he foresaw the coming of an age when the Most High and His Holy Mother would form for Himself great saints in sanctity. They would be true disciples of Jesus Christ, having been formed in the heart of Mary, and would be like sharp arrows in the hand of the powerful Mary to pierce her enemies. These disciples would be full of grace and zeal. They would be chosen to match themselves against the enemies of God who shall rage on all sides. Doesn't it feel like we're living in an age of rage? It's just coming at us from everywhere. They would be singularly devout to our Blessed Lady, led by her Spirit and sheltered under her protection. At Fatima, Mary told us her Immaculate Heart would be our refuge in the way that would lead us to God. She would never forsake us. That's what she said to Lucia, and that's a message to all of us. I am your mother, I will not forsake you. And so this goes right along with what St. Louis de Montfort was writing about. They shall fight with one hand and build with the other. And we seem to be fighting back the culture while we're also trying to rebuild our families, our communities, and our church. So we are fighting with one hand and rebuilding with another. Now I have to find, and here's my favorite one. They shall overthrow and crush the heretics, the schismatics, the idolaters, and the impious, and with the Holy Virgin would crush the head of the serpent. I truly believe we are living in the time that St. Louis de Montfort wrote about. We are the people that he wrote about in the latter times. We're the ones specially consecrated to Mary. If you're not yet, then please read the message of Fatima, live it, and go forward with the 33-day consecration program. Get yourself under Mary's protection. Get yourself working with her, because she's calling an army forward. And if you're here tonight and you're listening online, she's calling you. There's a reason why you're here to listen to this. Sometimes we don't feel like we have a sense of purpose. St. Louis de Montfort said the people that would do this would be under the radar. They'd be simple. They'd be unknown. Isn't that what we all are? I always say that Hollywood, Washington, New York, all these people know nothing about what's going on under the radar with God. And you're the simple people that he wants to use. I just feel so strongly that this is our time. We are all being called to stand up and not be afraid. Mary was never afraid. And at Fatima on the October 13th apparition, she brings St. Joseph with her. People have pondered, what was he doing there? What was that all about? Well, it took a long time for Mary's role in the church to be figured out, but now I think is the time of St. Joseph. He comes at a time when the family is about to be almost totally destroyed. He comes at a time when mankind can destroy the earth, destroy itself for the first time with weapons that it produces. So St. Joseph, Mary wants St. Joseph at her side. The family is being destroyed, and that's exactly what happened in Russia. This is why this is so important today. I'll get in, if you want me to talk about the consecration, I'll be happy to get into that. But Lucia, after the 1984 consecration, there were several things that happened where serious explosions occurred that totally wiped out Russia's nuclear program. Lucia said later that we avoided a nuclear war at that time. And I was actually speaking down in Texas, and I was staying at a former CIA member's house, and he was actually operating in Russia during the 1980s, and he had to follow Putin around. That was his job. And I asked him about these explosions that occurred. I said, did the CIA ever figure out what that was about? He goes, we had no idea what happened. And Lucy said it was Mary, that Mary interceded and prevented a nuclear war. It wiped out their nuclear program. And so, now I've lost my train of thought, which I do a lot. But I just want to give a timeline, because I think this is important. But we're not done yet here. We're still fighting the spread of Russia's, the communism, because Jesus told Lucia in 1931 that the consecration would be done, but it would be done too late. Russia will have already spread her errors. It wasn't done for 55 more years. Russia had that much time. Communism, which is a demonic ideology, had that much time to sneak into our culture, into our cinema, into our media, and we're experiencing it right now. We can see it. I want to read some of the things that Pope Pius XI wrote about in a very good encyclical. It's called Divini Redemptoris. He wrote it in 1937. I really encourage you to go to Vatican.com, Vatican.va, look up Divini Redemptoris, the encyclical by Pius XI, and read what he says about communism. It's a system that has no place for the very idea of God. There's no difference. Well, he says it's an atheistic system, and he condemned it as a demonic system. Look at the things that it produces. Class struggle. The communists try to they try to control people by separating them by classes and getting people fighting each other over the different classes. It deprives man of his liberty and dignity. It strips man of his liberty and deprives him of his dignity, removing all restraints designed to help him resist the impulses of blind instinct. Communism first wants to come in and destroy your culture, your history, tears down your history, replaces it with propaganda, and then it wants to start stripping man of his own dignity. And it takes away all morality, because there is no God. You can do whatever you want. And so then mankind starts to remove his own dignity. It insists on absolute equality. I mean, isn't that what we're seeing right now, even between the sexes? It takes away your right of private property. It has a rejection of the sacred character of human life and of the family. Robs parents of the rights to educate their children. Negation of the law and perennial morals. And the utopian ideal of a classless society with the abolition of the state. I mean, Pius XI sure had his finger on the pulse. He knew what was going on. We don't know why he didn't do the consecration. I heard it had something to do with it might have interfered with the investigations of the Fatima apparitions. But it's very important. John Paul II, even after the consecration was done, he said, he started warning in the 1990s of a new era of atheism that would come in a different form called relativism. And he said, if we don't change, if we don't start converting, the springtime is going to be delayed and we will see a new era of barbarism. And so he was warning the American bishops back in the 1990s. He knew this was not over. And he knew that Russia had spread its errors. And so many people are fighting, even at their local school boards, to have the right to educate their children. This is communism. It's Marxism. It's trying to replace the parents and the family with the state. And there was I interviewed a priest who had gone to Russia in 1991 after the communism fell and you were able to start practicing religious freedom again. He said, we were so shocked. We thought that we would go there. They went to Vladivostok. Maybe you've heard of them, Father Dan Maurer and Father Myron Effing. They went to Vladivostok, which is the largest Catholic diocese in Russia, the whole Siberian area, and they wanted to revive the Catholic Church there. He said, we thought people would start coming out of their homes and they would, they were practicing underground, not telling anybody, and we'd have all these people coming back to the church. He said, we found 15 people in the entire diocese who even remembered their faith. And he said, I wish I could bring people to the naked public square where God has been removed and see what it looks like. This was 1991. I interviewed him 20 years later this year, and I asked him how things are going, and he said, not much has changed. But he said, Russia is always going through these economic chaoses, and so the people are still trying to figure out how do we stand on our own. They always had the government taking care of them. But he said the family has been so completely destroyed there. And Russia did it by first introducing no-fault divorce. He said they had divorce where all you had to do is say to your wife, I divorce you, and they'd walk out the door. You didn't even have to tell the civil authorities that you were divorcing. So he said they had all these women and children that were just thrown out into the streets and into poverty. And abortion became the #1 way to maintain your economic stability because you couldn't afford to have a child. There was no support systems in place for you. The husbands were walking out the door, the wives were stuck with the children. So they had 8 to 10 abortions. Women were having 8 to 10 abortions, which were free. He said nowadays, even today, 80% of the marriages end in divorce after just 4 years. He said when the whole family has been destroyed and you have no understanding of what family is, how do you get it back? So that's what they're fighting over there. Now I know that people say, how come the consecration, you say it was done, but Russia hasn't converted? Lucia said the word conversion in Portuguese means to turn away from. That means that the consecration was meant to unchain Russia so that it could now go back to practicing religion. But it takes a long time to get it back when it's been so driven out. And, you know, when Jesus Christ rose from the dead, the world wasn't Christian the very next day. It took 300 years and many, many martyrs before they were able to get Christianity established. So that's what's going on in Russia. Now, both John Paul II and Sister Lucia said that the conversion will have to come through the Russian Orthodox Church. because they don't even want the Catholics over there. So it's, and when she said Russia will be converted, she didn't say they're going to be converted to Catholicism and everybody's going to be a happy Christian. So no, Russia was going to change. And so now everybody's trying to help Russia. You know, we're looking to that change in Russia to come through the Russian Orthodox Church. But the churches are being rebuilt there. And our organization in 1970 purchased the icon of Kazan that was discovered to be on the free marketplace. And the Orthodox Church had tried to purchase it, but they didn't have the money. So John Haffert raised the money. It was over $1 million. And it was an authentic copy of the original icon of Kazan that is so revered in Russia. And we kept it in our hotel in Domus Pachis in Fatima until John Paul II heard about it when he was in Fatima. In 1982, he went over there to see the icon. And then after the Communist Party was banned in 1991, he wanted that icon to be brought to him. So we transferred the icon to him. And we bought it with the intention that someday we would get it back to Russia. And John Paul II kept it in his personal apartment until he could finally send a delegation when the thawing between the Russian Orthodox and toward the Catholic Church thawed a little bit. He was able to send a delegation to return the icon. Well, they just rebuilt the cathedral, the original cathedral, over the spot where that icon was discovered in 1579, the original miraculous icon. That cathedral was just consecrated by the Russian Orthodox Church on July 21st this year, and our icon that we had purchased was placed in the cathedral, and it's now being revered again. And there were delegates from the Muslim church, because the Muslims also revere this icon. There was the Russian Orthodox, the Catholic were there, other Christian churches, and also government officials. And so we're seeing many Russian Orthodox churches are coming back there. But we have to worry about what's going on here. And so Mary's calling us to a personal conversion, and she's calling us to do this on behalf of the world, because we're not going to, you know, she's not going to triumph if her children are in such terrible disarray and families are disordered, and she wants Joseph by her side. So I just want to ask all of you to look at this message and what it's asking of you. I know we're kind of running out of time, but you know, if you don't know anything yet about the first Saturday devotion, that's part of this message, and it's a very beautiful way to really get to know Mary. You don't have to have the church put the program on for you. It just asks you to go to confession that day, or 8 days within the first Saturday, receive Holy Communion, pray a 15-decade rosary, and then spend 15 minutes with Our Lady making reparation, thinking about all the other mysteries of the rosary. And this is the most important part. I always ask Mary to come sit by me and help guide my meditation. She wants to draw you into her heart, and she wants you to have a relationship with her. And this is the way that we console her, and it's the way that we can help save souls. And it's an act of mercy to do this. It's an act of mercy because you don't know what graces she's able to send out and whose souls she's touching with these graces. Mary said, the more people come to this devotion, the more the graces will flow from my heart like a river and bring people closer to her and Jesus. So I really encourage you to do the first Saturday devotion. If you can get 5 done consecutively and do it in reparation for the blasphemies against her Immaculate Heart, then she will be with you with all the graces necessary for your salvation. But mainly, get that daily rosary in. Offer up your day. Offer up your sufferings. If you're making additional little penances, you know, we can all offer up a little bit of food. We can offer up an hour on the internet. There's things we can offer up and replace it with our time with God. Just increase our prayer life. So that's all I have. I didn't even use my notes. I had a really hard time trying to figure out how to focus, because if you start talking about where we're at today, you have to go back and talk about the past. So it gets really deep with Fatima, but I'm willing to take any questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions? Anything at all about the World Apostolate of Fatima?
Oh. Yeah. I think they want you to go to the... Do you want them to go to the microphone? Okay.
Did you ever have the chance to meet Sister Lucia?
No, I didn't, but I had an experience with her in the chapel when I was trying to figure out how I was going to get this book written or translated and edited. And I felt like I had been praying to her and asking for help. And I felt like either she or the Blessed Mother kind of knocked me across the head and said, this is the work that's been given you, now ask God to help you get it done. And the more I've gotten to know Sister Lucia, I feel like that would have been how she would have been. You know, she just was kind of a hard driving person. She was very dedicated. But no, I've had experiences with her as far as praying to her and asking her to help me. She's helped get me out of many, many things, especially when it comes to spreading the message.
Right.
And so, I think about how hard it was for her to learn how to read and write, and how difficult it was for her to write to the bishops and the popes. I mean, it was very difficult for her. She didn't feel good enough she didn't know how she was going to communicate with them. Well, I always tell her, okay, I'm out here speaking about this message, and I am not a speaker. I never was. I was always hiding behind my computer being a writer. So I feel she helps me every time when I ask her. But I never got to meet her. I did get to meet the nuns, though, that lived with her and who knew her.
Okay, thank you. And just another thought that I want to share. I think the message of the angel
yes.
to the children is also so important for this time, because like he gave them the Holy Communion and the precious blood. And so often now, like people, they say, oh, I don't want to go to church. And I think, how can you walk away from going to Mass when you're receiving our Lord? There's no love or devotion. And you see how that angel prostrated himself on the ground and said, the beautiful prayers. It's just a sign for our times as well.
Yeah. That's a good point. The angel is a very, very important part of this message. And I think the angel came to prepare them, taught them how our Lord deserves to be worshipped. I mean, we are so, we can be so distracted when we go to Mass, but God deserves us to bow down before him. And the angel showed that to the children. Now, the interesting thing about the angel apparitions, and of course he taught them, he gave them First Holy Communion. It was Francisco and Jacinta's First Holy Communion. And Francisco never got communion again until his deathbed. But he asked Lucia, what was it the angel gave us? And she told him it was the Holy Eucharist. And he goes, I felt that God was in me, but I didn't know how. And the other interesting thing about the angel, when he appeared to them, I mean, they had such powerful experiences. There was like a supernatural aura that was around them for days. They could hardly talk. It made them woozy. And because the angel is pure spirit, he didn't have a body. And when Our Lady appeared to them, it felt light and approachable, and they were able to communicate with her. They didn't have this woozy, overwhelming feeling. So I think that's also very important to distinguish. The angel is a pure spirit, and the Blessed Mother has a body. Yes, he identified himself as the angel of Portugal, and the Portuguese always have the angel of Portugal or the guardian angel of Portugal. The Portuguese have always looked to Saint Michael the Archangel as being their guardian angel. So we don't know if it was actually Saint Michael the Archangel, but there's a lot in Portugal. Many of them believe that it was Saint Michael the Archangel. And many of you have heard. Oh, go ahead. Sure.
Do you think that we will see the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart?
Well, I hope so. Lucia said it takes a long time to unfold, but she said that in 1991. I think we're heading towards something very quickly. I don't know. I think we're going to see some tougher times, and we're all going to have to be willing to stand up for our faith and be courageous. We're only going to be strengthened if we go to the Eucharist and get those sacraments. Make sure you're cleaning out your sins and going to confession, because God deserves us. When we come to receive him in Holy Communion, we should be as pure as we can possibly be. And then we're going to receive that grace at a greater level, and it's going to strengthen us. But we need to be fearless. We have to think about St. Joseph, too, when he had to take Mary into Egypt, and they were living in a pagan land. They were surrounded by people that, were hostile to them, but he was fearless. So we have to be the same. I hope we see the triumph. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think it has something to do with the two hearts, Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary together, and some greater understanding of that. It will involve peace, a peace that mankind has not known. Mm-hmm. It's a peace that, what does the Divine Mercy message tell us too? Mankind will not know peace until it turns to my mercy. Mm-hmm. We have to convert. We have to change. We can't triumph if we're not converted. So, mm-hmm. Sure.
I just wanted to mention also that when my sister and I taught CCD, we ended every class with the prayer that was taught at Fatima. The kids would say the angel prayer.
Oh, okay. And I say it all the time when I go to communion.
And the kids loved it because it's easy. Oh my God, I love you, I adore you, I hope. And they would prostrate in their heads and kneel, and they liked that prayer. So.
Yeah. I forget my question.
Well, if it comes to, I want to mention one more thing. How many of you have heard the message that Lucia had given to Cardinal Carlos Caffarra? In 1981, he had written to her and asked her to pray for him because he was about ready to take over the reins of the new Pontifical Institute of Studies for Marriage and Family that John Paul II started. He was surprised to get a letter back from her, and she said, Father, the time will come, the final battle against the reign of God by Satan will be on marriage and family. But do not be afraid. Anyone who works for marriage and family will always be opposed. And she said, our Blessed Mother has already crushed his head. She said, do not be afraid that the Blessed Mother has already crushed his head. So we're outside of time. The devil knows his time is running out, and he's getting stronger. It seems like he's in control of everything, and we get no wins anywhere. But God has a greater plan for this. He's got all the evil has to be evident in order for the greater good to come out. Well, Cardinal Caffarra said, I think it was a couple of years later, he said, I believe that prophecy is coming true right now. Satan is trying to create a new creation, a new Genesis. He's not a human being. He wasn't made in the image of God. He's pure spirit. So he's neither male nor female. So he said he's trying to destroy the pillars of Genesis, which is that God created them male and female. And there's a difference between the two. They're not the same. They're not equal. They're different. And he created the union of the man and the woman. And Satan's trying to destroy that and create a new creation in his image. So all this stuff going on with gender fluidity and transgenderism is total evil. It's Satan trying to create us in his image, removing our identity as male and female and the dignity of the human person. So pay attention to what's going on and understand the evil that we are facing. And that, sometimes we feel overwhelmed. We don't know what we can do about it. We can pick up our rosary beads and pray. We can go to our first Saturdays. Go do Eucharistic adoration. Spend some time with our Lord and making reparation for those who are not willing to do it. Those children said, no matter what, if no one else will do it, I will do it. They stood alone in their penances for that whole time during the apparitions. It took a long time for people to understand what this message was about. I can talk forever, so I'll stop now. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So that's going to conclude our presentation. As I mentioned earlier, Barb is going to stay with us. She'll be in the gathering space after this. I'm sure she would answer more questions.
Yeah. If anybody wants to join our organization, get our emails and learn about our events at the shrine and get more information on Fatima, we have these little cards that you can fill out, and then we'll get you on our mailing list.